Hello, welcome to another non-commentary, where I need to use the fact that I spent some time getting some footage to do something with it, and so we're going to have another case here, where I tell you why I didn't play Solar Nations, which for game design freaks like me, can be very much as interesting a thing to look at as why someone would want to play a game. Well, what is this thing? It's another space game. In my infinite quest to play every space game that exists, this thing came along from somewhere, and here on the menu, I was curious that it had the continue button there, even though I'd only just opened the game. So I pressed continue, and here we are. It seems it comes with a save, I guess, already in the files or something, and we just jump into a Solar Nation. This is a Conquer the Dots style game, although it's not a dots and lines style game, so it's the more advanced version of the classic 4X space game setup. Harder to play and harder to make, but there's more potentially to do. Well, we'll look at that later. You can see I'm poking about on Earth. There are quite a few people here, and you can build various things. One thing you might note is that the title for the buildings here is at the bottom of the row that represents it. That's outrageous, and basically we're going to be talking about various UI things right here. It's another UI criticism in a space game video. Another thing to mention right off the bat is that a lot of that text right there is way too small. It's out of control how small that text is in those big empty spaces. Makes you wonder, was the game tested at this resolution? But this is just classic 1080p. Still, that's way too small, needs to be way bigger. Another text thing to note is that as you zoom out to look at your Solar Nations, it doesn't align the text to the camera's orientation, so a lot of the words are upside down, which just makes things a lot harder. I don't really think that's a good idea. I feel like at first I thought maybe there's some advantage to doing it like that. I can't think of what it might be. This just seems worse. It should probably have the text rotate to be the right way up from the perspective of the camera at all times. The Milky Way is all looking very nice, so that's good. It's not your classic 4X map, it actually looks like a real image that we're fighting over, so that's all very pretty. We've got all sorts of territory already, and who knows what's going on. There's obviously a pretty complicated 4X system going on in the background here, where all of the places have all of the numbers are interacting in some way, and it's our job to do something to those numbers to make some other numbers go up, and that's supposed to be good. I'm sure there's loads going on, but the thing is, and the topic of this video I suppose, is just going to be that it's hard to find stuff out when the UI has various breakages and is very small, basically. That's the summary of this video. Stuff's too small. I can't play this game. I can't read it. Even now on the screen you can see there's tons of little bits and pieces of text here and there that's too small. They have adjusted it with the little icons over the planets. They change in size as you scroll the camera to try and keep them readable and stop them overlapping, I suppose. And I remember doing something like that myself when I developed a really good game called Godless Tactics, doing something with the UI scaling with the camera zooming as well. But it just doesn't quite work here, and it's still too small a lot of the time. Clicked on a planet and this came up. I don't know what I'm doing here, but it feels like there's a neutral planet that I can sort of persuade to join me. I think that's what was going on there. Quick look at the tech tree. Again, it is too small. One thing I will say though, is that it's a better tech tree than in Stellaris, where you basically can't see the tech tree and it sort of has this random element to what you're allowed to research. At least here you can see where things are going, which is very unrealistic, I suppose, but in a meta-gaming sense, once you've played a game and you can know where the tech trees go, it might as well just tell you. Here's a look at some sort of government screen, I suppose, where the smallness is out of control. Some of this text is barely on the screen at all, but it is there, and those little scrolling menus as well don't really help, because this menu could just be way bigger and then you wouldn't have to scroll on it, and the text could be bigger. Essentially, make everything bigger. That's always my UI criticism. From the smallest game to the biggest, highest budget game, I'm always saying stuff needs to be bigger. And here's another example. This diplomacy screen, for some reason, is minute. And again, I'm forced to ask, did they run the game at 1080p to see how small it is? Because this is a pretty obvious problem here. Well, I've improved my relationship with my neighbors, so I actually did something here. Doing this, for some reason, reduces your stability stat, so we're sowing chaos by sending love letters to the Empire of Orion. Not quite sure why. They don't want to ally to me because I'm too weak. Well, probably. That's the faction, the giant faction that's next to me, so I'm actually doing some real strategic diplomacy then, thinking maybe the yellow faction should be on our side. I click on another thing and bring up another thing, and there are a lot of mechanics in this game. I'm seeing here basically every mechanic that I've ever seen in every 4X game, just in all of these different menus. This is clearly a very detailed 4X space game simulator. But again, while it seems that a lot's going on here, I don't think I can get to it. I don't think I can easily grasp what's happening, because either things are too small, or it's just not obvious what's going on. This game doesn't have a tutorial, so we're just sort of poking around in this random save that appears to be here, attempting to work out what's going on. It does say at the top there, disable tutorial, so that message about moving the camera, I suppose, is the tutorial. I thought more things might come up. There's stuff going on here where we can do decisions, like in a Paradox game, to change things. Enacting the Hydra plan sounds pretty good, and the text there is just about legible, but not really. Probably not if you're watching this on anything smaller than a cinema screen. Looks like there's a maelstrom happening somewhere, so there's random weather events to contest with in space. It's all here. Every mechanic, every modifier, a billion different ways to set up your empire and play it. You just can't read it, and this is a real problem. It's like the game has this weak link in the chain that it can only be as good as, and that's how the game is presented to the player. And it makes me feel like this is a missed opportunity. There's something quite detailed, a lot of planning, a lot of game design has gone into this, but it's all hidden behind the fact that you can't really tell what's going on unless you're really used to it, I suppose, already. Now, while I was reading that tooltip, we actually get invaded by that yellow faction I was trying to make friends with, so that didn't go very well. And some sort of thing happens here. The military aspect of the game appears to be effectively not here. You have ships with numbers attached to them, the classic setup, and they just sort of dance around near each other, and it's implied that they're fighting in some way. So extremely limited on the graphical front, and even the AI front maybe, because the way the ships kind of buzz around like insects seems kind of broken. I'm not sure it's supposed to be doing that. Maybe they should be stationary while they're taking a planet or something. A bit strange. So anyway, we're basically screwed. That's the end of this campaign for us, because this yellow faction has already defeated us in space. They can now do whatever they want to us, and we're a long way away from working out how to make a new unit or something like that, so we've basically lost. And there you go, the save is doomed. But I was already at this stage like, well, we're just not going to be able to do this because the UI is too small, and I don't even know slightly what's going on. However, there was hope. I thought, I'm going to go into the settings menu and see if you can change the UI scale, and I was shocked that you could. I expected it to be stuck like this, but no, you actually can make this better. You can make all UI elements bigger, and that obviously helps out. Although of course some elements were already fine in size, so making everything bigger isn't really the solution. It needs to be a developer side solution where the small things are made similar sized to the big things. I decided to try it just at the maximum that this options menu will allow, going up to 150% size. And some things like this diplomacy menu begin to approach legibility. We can see the names of some of the factions, we can see some of those modifiers there as well. It's kind of working. But the downside is that the UI isn't set up to work at 150% scale all the time. So for example, there's that mess going on in the top right. I remember in Unity, and I presume this is developed in Unity, you have to set up this sort of pins system where you determine which areas of the screen various UI elements are allowed to go into as the user changes their resolution, because your UI needs to be not stuck at a certain resolution. You have to set up rules for how it's going to move around. If, say, the user switches to a different aspect ratio or something like that, it still needs to work and not overlap each other. So there's a way of doing it, but it doesn't appear to have been done here. Here I am, clicking on a planet, and you just get that window that comes up with nothing in it. I think that's because if you click on a planet that's not yours, it starts showing you the user interface for the planet, but because you can't do anything, everything's disabled inside the user interface, so nothing happens effectively. There's what's supposed to happen. So you need to either have it be different if you click on an enemy planet, or not come up with a blank window, just because that's sort of silly, really. looks like we're not doing very well in this war. We're losing the middle of our human empire, our solar nation, nationalism in space, who'd have thunk it, and it's not going all that well. But can we be saved by this feature? Firstly, the save game button doesn't work, so that's interesting. You can't make saves, so I suppose that's a nail in the coffin, another one. There's this editor button though, that sort of lets you just change the situation. It feels like I'm playing a beta of a game or a debug version of the game because I can go in here and just do anything, it seems, so that's a useful menu to have. Well, it did say this is version 1.1 release on the menu, so this is it. This is the finished version. But I'm here to essentially say to whoever it was that made this is not finished. This does not function, at least for me it does not function, and it needs to function in most cases to be deemed finished, I think. I ended up getting actually stuck because there's no way out that I could find of the scenario menu. It could be that the button to leave here isn't on the screen because I've turned the UI scale up and it's been moved off the screen, outside of the camera's view. So that's an issue, and well, that's the end of my time playing Solar Nations, clicking wildly, just stuck in a section of the UI, unable to leave, unable to save, and unable to conceive of why this game has been released like this. It feels like a single tester, for example me, would immediately bring up all these issues and deem that the game cannot be released. So it feels like it was thrown out the door or something. And by the way, I don't know why I have this game. I think it might have been sent to me for free or something. One of the games that sometimes goes through the spam filter. I've mentioned before that my system for accepting free games from random publicity emails is that if it somehow goes through the spam filter, I might actually read it, but the vast majority of free games that get sent to YouTubers will just disappear. And they're usually just like scam mobile games. Most games that get released aren't ever worth looking at, so I'm fine with the spam filter just blocking all of that free stuff from me. But here's one that I probably let through and decided to look into on my 4X space game quest. And as I said, I felt disappointed because I can tell that a lot of work actually did go into this. There's a gigantic mechanical system behind the scenes there, but the scenes themselves are so utterly broken that we can't break through. I feel like probably the developer themselves developed this complex system, this love letter to the 4X genre with every mechanic in it, very detailed for hardcore 4X space game players, but they were so blind to the UI because they were so used to using their sort of beta development UI that they came to accept it as it was. And then you show it to me, somebody from the outside who will just compare everything to Endless Space 2 and always be annoyed, comes in here and just thinks, well, it almost doesn't matter how much work went into everything, all the programming, because the basic design isn't there. Now I can't really talk because I also released a video game with some very rudimentary UI design, but I still feel like it went a bit better than this, and this needs to go a bit better than this. That's my final review of Solar Nations. Feels like there's probably a classic 4X space game in this .exe file, in the code, but you can't see it if you are to run that .exe for the most part. And a million small things need improving that altogether just damn the entire project. Well, that's the end of this commentary, I suppose. I don't know what the point of this was. Well, the point was I needed to make a commentary on something because I have limited time in my schedule. I can't go play a different game, so there was a commentary on this game which I did not play, and now you know why, perhaps. Since I hadn't given up on playing a space game, I decided to switch instead to playing Homeworld Remastered, which is a different kind of space game, not really the usual 4X thing that I'm trying to quest my way through. But still, there's plenty to say about that game, an old classic of the strategy genre, so I'll be praising and complaining about Homeworld Remastered soon. Solar Nations probably needs to go off the market and redevelop not the game itself but just its presentation, just the UI, and then come back and it will probably be way more successful. That's my guess anyway, but of course that's far easier said than done, and that's probably why it got to this point in the first place, because maybe you're really good at programming but you don't know much about UI design or how to do it in the specific game engine you're using. Well, that's how life is. Some people who can ride a horse can't play the violin, and the same thing applies to programming and game development in general, and I think that's probably the cleverest thing anyone's ever said. I'll say more things on this channel in the future.